Big thanks to all the CPA candidates that attended the Universal Q&A session last night. It was our pleasure to answer all of your questions. If you didn't get a chance to attend last night, we'll be holding similar sessions in the future, so be on the lookout for event details. Now, the Q&A session, it covered a variety of technical topics from each exam, as well as general questions on how to study, what to do for your last 7 days leading up to exam day, and then a bunch of other random questions, right? So enjoy the video. Again, reach out if you have any additional questions.
So Kim, Vita, Sanjeev, you guys have any questions? Completely fine if not, and you just want to listen in and see what other questions people have. But
no, I didn't have any questions. I just was kind of interested in what questions other people might have.
Yeah. If not, we could just sort of start talking and see kind of where everybody's at.
Yeah, we did this. We did this about 2 months ago. We're going to try to do it more frequently, just because we know. I think it's helpful to have just hear from the community, right? Other candidates. I mean, I remember when we took the exam. Unless have somebody you're studying with, it kind of feels isolated, right? You don't really have anybody else, and these Facebook groups are, they're only groups at the end of the day, and your family and friends just absolutely don't get it. So, what exam are you currently studying for?
I'm studying for BEC.
Nice. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of BEC, adding BEC topics lately, and IT is just getting out of control. I mean, there's lots of unknown, I think, just based on the blueprint. I mean, unlike FAR, Reg, and audit, right? There's some authoritative guidance that kind of guides as to what is tested, but BEC, right? The blueprint will say something like cybersecurity and where are the boundaries on what they test, right? So that's something I think, as a review course, we just try to put it there, and it's all a probability in our mind, right? We don't want to give everybody tons of information if there's a small chance you'll see it. So we try to get some feedback and try to only really put out what we think is going to be most heavily tested, because at the end of the day, I mean, you're not going for 100%, you're going for a passing score. But how do you feel about it?
I'm a little apprehensive. I know certain things, but the sections with the cost accounting is one of my issues. So, and then economics.
Yeah. Economics is tough because it's very conceptual. I think in general, right, BEC has, if you really jotted down all the formulas, they can be a bit overwhelming. And what I really try to do is, because even as myself, working on these, yes, I have to go look them up, but in general, I'd say it's more important to really understand and interpret the ratio. So think beyond the ratio as to, how you would explain to somebody why you're calculating the ratio and really what the outcome is. And then it becomes a lot more intuitive.
Yes.
I mean, I was just doing a question on weighted average cost of capital, and everybody knows that formula. It's confusing as hell, but I actually did a video without the formula, because if you just think about more intuitively of what you're trying to calculate, then it's a little bit more methodical as how to get there, right? Because at the exam day, yes, if you memorize the formulas, but at the same time, if you're trying to find the information and plug it into the formula note, versus if you know sort of what you're trying to do from a more high level perspective, then it's not going to be as difficult as finding the specific inputs to that formula, right? How to interpret the information and ultimately figure out what answer you're going for. So it's a broad statement, but it's more think beyond the formulas. And I think when you interpret it and you understand it, then the formulas will just become second nature.
That's what I'm telling myself, and I'm actually scheduled to take it on the 31st. So I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm trying.
I mean, the reality, right, is these exams are, there are people that pass first time around, and that's awesome. But at the same time, most people take it a couple times, right? And part of it is just understanding where your weaknesses is, where your strengths are, and recalibrating. I mean, that's what most things are in life, just, learning how to fill in, the weaknesses and come back the next time. I mean, that's the reality in our minds.
Okay.
Yeah. Is anybody else studying for a specific question or a specific section that they have any questions on, concerns about specific content areas, or just have any sort of general thoughts on their section? if you want to put it in the chat box, or you could just speak up, whatever works best for everyone.
I'm studying, this is Vita, I'm studying Reg.
Okay.
And I am just having a hard time. I think I understand it. And then when I go and do the questions, I don't, which is section 1250.
Okay.
It's like I get the 1245, but then the 1250, when you're doing the recapturing to categorize it, is it, and at 25%, and all of that just throws me off.
Yeah, I mean, that's a rather challenging concept as far as real property goes. And, at the end of the day, understanding the recapture, what you're thinking about here is the fact that depreciation was previously taken on this asset at some point, and that depreciation was deductible from that business asset. So now the IRS is coming back and saying, all right, you already took that depreciation. You can't just get out of not paying ordinary tax on that, ordinary income tax on that by just selling off the assets. So you're going to go back and recapture that essentially as essentially as depreciation that was taken as a deduction that now we're going back and recapturing as ordinary income, so that it's taxable at what it would have been had you not sold it. And it's kind of just goes back to understanding sort of the intuition about, related to the topic, like everything else. But the reality is that is a very tough concept for anybody. I don't care who you are. Recapture, even if you're a tax practitioner, explaining that and actually putting it into application is something that everybody sort of struggles with. The actual details of the calculation I'm not going to say that, that's not testable, but as far as, property tax goes and that content area, the calculation for as complicated as it is not overly emphasized on the actual exam. If that sort of eases your stress a little bit.
Oh yes, it does.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're never going to see it, but the reality is that's not something that is incredibly emphasized, if that helps a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, when's your exam date?
October 15th.
Okay, so you have a fair amount of time. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is an exam that is challenging, but it's not, incredibly complicated calculations. It's adding and subtracting, and it really comes down to just knowing the rules as to what you're going to add, what you're going to subtract, and navigating your way through individual tax, property tax, and corporate tax. Something I would suggest when it comes to entity tax, when you get into it, have you gotten to that subject yet?
Yeah, I started there because it was the bulk is there, like the percentage was higher there, but I had to go back to property because I couldn't understand some of the things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, when it comes to property, what you're going to focus on is basis in assets, which could be 3 different types of basis: acquired assets, inherited assets, or gifted assets, right? At a really high level. You're also going to focus on, more specifically, the non-taxable gains. So things like involuntary conversions. You're going to think about like-kind exchanges, which is a big one. Things of that nature, homeowners exclusion. So those are the big ones to focus on as far as non-taxable gains. But that and basis in those 3 different types of assets, acquired, inherited, and gifted, are going to be really where the bulk of the exam is going to focus its attention on.
Okay. Well, I feel better because I understand that more than I was doing. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 35-40%. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, lead us or let us. I think this is an applicable question to probably, FAR and the rest of them as well. And retaining information. I mean, it's, if you think about there's a lot of curves out there that kind of somebody's tried to break down what's the best way to learn, right? So the first step is always kind of reading and understanding. That's like the basic level of, do you have a slight comprehension for this, right? Ultimately, if you can apply it, which means, you can do the calculations, then that's the next level, which is really, the exam kind of bounces between remembering and understanding and then actual application. In our minds, if you can get to the application phase. So like, for example, in FAR, right, there's a lot of questions about, how would this impact the financial statements, right? And you might say, well, it's going to be recorded in current assets, but if you think one step further about like what would the journal entry be to record that activity, right? That is taking it all the way to the application phase. And so in a sense, if you do that for all these various topics, I think a lot of it will come together and it will make a lot more sense. Because if you think about how FAR is sort of structured, at least for, you know, Universal and from the other review courses we've seen, it's a lot of introduction to the financial statements, and then you dig into the specific topics and you learn about the specifics and how those actually impact the financial statement. So if you're all the way thinking, you know, ultimately what is the end impact of the financial statements, then that will help sort of retain and get you to that level of application. Now, the last phase, and this is where, you know, if you can really get here, then this is as good as it gets. This is hopefully what we're doing, is teaching it, right? Teaching it to somebody else shows that you've gone through that whole thought process, you put it into your own words, and now you're explaining or teaching somebody else. And that's the point where you are now, you know, at the high level of learning or understanding for the topics. Now, maybe that's more than you actually need for the CPA exam, but at the same time, if you get to that phase with whatever topic it is, then you're gonna have a much more, you know, rounded out understanding of it, and you'll be able to process the questions, the simulations a lot quicker, right? And that's kind of the difference between when you hear people panic about, you know, I didn't get to the simulations with that much time left. Well, that's probably because they weren't able to methodically move through the multiple choice questions. So if you get to the simulations, you don't have much time, well, that's going to be hard to pass, right? So if you take that thought process of, you know, how would I explain this to somebody else? I mean, we say this all the time, but truly, if you can get to that, then you're going to understand the topic, and then retention of the material, you know, is second nature to you.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, FAR is definitely the most voluminous, you know, of all the sections. I think everybody knows that at this point. But what I always tell people with FAR is, because of just how much detail is within the content, is to start at an extremely high level and simplify your way down. So at the end of the day, there are two questions related to FAR, right? There's how is this going to be classified? Meaning, where in the financial statements is this going to be located? Is it going to be the income statement, the balance sheet, the statement of cash flows, retained earnings? Where's it going? And then the second question is always the valuation, right? How are we calculating it? That inventory number, 6,482,365, right? How are we calculating that? And then you got to back into the different methods for each single topic. The FAR exam is literally dissecting every single line item in the financial statements. And at the end of the day, you need to treat each topic as its own mini exam. And I know that sounds crazy, but you know, because there's 60 different topics, but you need to be able to ask yourself, all right, if we're talking about cash flows, what are the 2 to 5 questions related to this topic do they typically ask? And sort of outline that as you go. And then when you're going back and applying it, like Matt said, you're now going to be able to sort of identify, all right, which of the 2 to 5 questions am I looking for here? If it's cash flows, is it, you know, how does interest impact the statement of cash flows? Where's that getting located? Dividend income, et cetera. And so at the end of the day, if you could kind of give yourself this high level roadmap for every single topic and create a mini exam in itself and be able to identify more or less the 2 to 3 questions. And now, you know, you have a systematic approach for each of those questions, which is kind of our idea behind the mental map. You know, now you have a step 1, a step 2, a step 3, a step 4, this menu of options for every single topic. So it's sort of about putting together a mini strategy for every single topic and sort of attacking it in that manner.
Yep. And that's true of any section as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
It goes back to just like, can you think through, you know, if you understand all angles of it, then you're going to understand, you know, no matter what they ask, a lot better. Sanjeev asked about Reg Exam. This is a topic that is always, you know, specific thresholds, limitations, all those things. Trust us, we are always asking the AICPA, what is the actual like numbers that are going to be tested? The reality is that there's a delay. Sometimes they never even implement some of these new thresholds into the exam, right? You'd think, well, it's happening in the real world per the IRS, but it doesn't always make its way to the exam. And if it does, it's sometimes 10 months delayed. We actually asked them earlier this month, can we have like the actual list of all the limitations and thresholds? And they said they couldn't give it to us. They don't even have it kind of ready, right? So I think the reality, Joey, and correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty much most of those they give you in the question, and it's more how do you take that information to solve, right? Going back to, do you add, subtract, how do you apply those rules? There's not a ton of, questions or, that you have to remember the specific limitations or thresholds, right?
Yeah, the Reg Exam is not about, they're not testing your ability to memorize the different phase out thresholds. That's just not what they care about, because they change every single year. And the reality is we all have access to the Internal Revenue Code. Anybody can look this up. And that's just not what they care about. They care about your understanding of the actual application of these calculations. They want you to know the rules of the Internal Revenue Code. So, with the exception of a select few, the ones that come to mind are the mom and pop exception when it comes to passive activity and materially participating activities for real estate. That's one that you got to know, the $25,000 and the $100,000 to $150,000 range. But you don't need to really be memorizing all the thresholds. They're generally going to give that to you. And I just can't imagine that it's something that needs to be a huge concern. Don't spend your time memorizing thresholds.
Right. Ross, good to see you. Do you happen to know the answer to this question, Joe? We might have to follow up on this one, but obviously these technical ones are hard to spit off the.
Yeah, non-qualified use, say a rental property, personal residence reduced. Yeah, so non-qualified, there's two different exclusions to the homeowner's exclusion. Non-qualified use, and I believe you're talking about if you're renting out the property. In that case, you're going to focus, you're phasing out the gain. So basically, when it comes to non-qualified use, always remember that something will be taxed. At some point, you're going to be taxed on a portion of this gain. We're reducing the gain. Whereas when it comes to the hardship provision, for example, we're going to be reducing the $250,000 to $500,000 exclusion amount. So there is still a chance with the hardship provision, meaning, you don't meet the 2 out of 5 year test, you're forced to move within 14 months, let's say. A portion of that phase out range, the $250,000 exclusion or $500,000 is getting reduced. So like I said, you could still be completely exempt from paying a gain or paying tax on a gain. Whereas if we're talking about non-qualified use, that gain is still going to be taxed to an extent. That's the way I always try to explain it. As a rental property, residence reduced personal expense. Yeah, so yeah, non-qualified use, like I said, is rental property, whereas the other one you need to really think about is the hardship provision, which is, like I said, if you're forced to move because of something like a medical reason, etc. I hope that answered adequately.
Does it help, Ross? If not, we can follow up.
Yeah, or if you want to chime in and vocalize this, I can probably understand a little bit better.
Yeah, hey Matt, hey Joey. Sorry, I was confused about whether to type in or not, because it's hard to tell whenever you're online. But
no worries.
I was just asking about, I've seen sometimes in a simulation where, let's say 2 out of the 6 years, whenever they bought the personal residence and they were looking for the 2-year test, that they started it out as a rental property instead of moving into the personal residence. And then that would reduce the exclusion whenever you do go to sell the personal residence. I think it was okay. Yeah,
so let's say, for a quick high level example, you live in the property 14 months out of 24 months, right? The 2 out of 5 year test. You don't meet the 2-year requirement. You sell this at a gain of $100,000. All right, that 14 out of 24, that fraction that we're going to be reducing this by, right? You lived in there for 14 months. That means 14 out of the 24 months is the prorated portion of that $100,000 gain that you are going to be exempt from paying tax on, if that makes sense. Think of it this way. The IRS wants you to prove that you actually lived in the home as your principal place of abode. So if it's non-qualified use, we're going to be prorating the portion of the gain, not the exclusion amount, the $250,000 if you're single.
Yeah, that's what I was confused on the prorate against the gain versus the exclusion. And I always kept getting the gain in the, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. Non-qualified use, we're prorating the gain. Hardship provision, we're prorating the exclusion.
But if for the non-qualified use, it's the remaining gain after any depreciation, recapture, and everything else.
You're
on
always
top of
going,
that.
yeah, you're always going to pay tax on a portion of the gain if it's non-qualified use. We're just prorating the portion that you need to pay tax on, right?
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does make sense. I just I kept getting it confused between the unforeseen circumstances with the hardships and then the non-qualified use.
Yeah, same situation. Let's say $100,000 gain, right? 14 out of 24 months. That 14 out of 24 months is the portion of the 250,000 that you can now take as an exemption. So that's still going to be over 100,000. So therefore, you could still pay zero tax on those gains in that example, right? So you're better off with the hardship provision than non-qualified use. Non-qualified use, we're reducing the gain, meaning there's always going to be some gain you're paying tax on.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's hard to show.
Yeah.
You know, visual learning is what we're about. That's why I need to show you, you know?
Yeah, totally.
This is exactly
totally.
my point, you know?
It's a lot for sure, for me at least. So, but that definitely cleared it up. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, no worries. You feel free to reach out to me personally and I'll try to send you an example if you're still struggling.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll put our emails in. Let's see, Kim, closer to the exam day. Yeah, I think, you know, this is a tough one. I think everybody, Kim, is this your first exam? You said?
Yes.
Is it?
This is the first one.
Yeah, I think in general, there's something just innately different about the CPA exam than, you know, any scenario you experienced in college. And there's a lot you learn on your first exam. There's a lot you learn on your second exam. By the time you get to the fourth exam, you're still learning. I think the whole idea of the CPA exam is there's a learning process. And so you'll learn, you know, basically that you're never going to be ready for the CPA exam. Nobody, you know, sits there and goes, I'm going to ace it, right? And that's the reality. It's about just being confident in the time that you put in, because when you get to the exam and when you're sitting there, if you start to doubt yourself, that's when you start to, you know, fret and you overlook the little details, and then you start to lose track of your time. But if you're confident as to what you know, and if you see something on the exam that you're not, you know, you've never seen before, like, it's just, that's the reality, right? And again, you're only trying to get a 75%. So either skip it and move on, give it your best educated guess, but just trust sort of that overall you're ready for at least 75% of the content. Because the other reality is there's pre-test questions. They could be on something that isn't even going to be included in your score, right? So I think the biggest thing is just, you have to do whatever you can to be confident rolling into that day, because confidence is key. You know, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different, you know, the last few days. What exactly do you do? Any thoughts, Joey? I don't even remember what I did.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just leading up to the exam and confidence, you know, I mean, I would say some of my rock bottoms just kind of have been going through this exam. You know, I mean, I was totally unprepared when I first started studying for this. You know, first time I ever tried this, I went into this thinking a 75%. I got tons of 75s in college. You know, yes. I can easily just float through this, and I was wrong. I was terribly wrong. You know, I bombed it. I didn't think that I could do it. But you commit to the process. You know, at the end of the day, you ask yourself, like, is this really what I want? And it's not something you passively do. It's something you really commit to, and you commit an enormous amount of time to it. You put your life on hold. And, you know, we're not going to sit here and tell you, like, if, you know, these are the tricks to passing this thing in 3 months, because with the exception of a select few, you know, that's just not the reality of everybody's experience. And, you know, I think when it comes to leading up to the actual exam, you know, as you get closer, you know, you just got to remind yourself, do you know it? You know, and the answer most of the time is yes, you do know it. And you really should be scheduling your exam as you sort of start to feel like, all right, this is clicking. I do get it. I have a path to being ready in the next 3 to 4 weeks of taking it. Nothing really is, you know, I can't really foresee anything getting in my way of you know, absorbing the rest of this material and being ready for exam day. And once you get there, you know, I mean, you gotta, you know, you're gonna know very quickly if you know it. You know, I think the first testlet is always a medium difficulty testlet. So if you find yourself cruising through it and you find that the second testlet is significantly harder, it means you're on pace to passing. And at the end of the day, you know, there's really only so much you can do in overcoming that. You need to remind yourself that, you know, you put in the work, you do know it. You were getting the questions right, you know, in the homeworks and as you were studying, and that's really all you can do. And that's sort of why we're here to support you throughout that, and, you know, offer any sort of guidance along the way.
Has anybody, I think, because I paid to take 2 exams and then I never took any of them, and then the 6 months passed. I think I have more so a fear of failing than actually wanting to go try it and then worry about failing. I always feel like it's more that I could study and know. I don't know everything, but you're never going to know everything, 100%.
Right. You're not going to know everything 100%. That's exactly right. And you don't need to know everything, but you do need to. That's why, going back to what I said initially about treating every single topic into studying for its own mini exam, you want to feel like you're 80% confident in as many of those topics as possible. It's about absorbing as much, as much information related to a topic as possible. And you need to be as prepared in each topic as possible. And I think it's about breaking it up into a bite-sized, digestible manner and sort of attacking it, one step at a time and one section at a time and one topic at a time. And that's sort of how we try to deliver that with our mental maps and our systematic approaches, because the only way to get this done is to break it down, right? In the same way that, you want to break down your food when you eat it, you want this to be digestible, and you want it to stick, and you want to be able to absorb it. And, and I think at the end of the day, it's about being able to understand it. When you do understand it, you're going to have that confidence going into it.
Okay.
Now, what do you think?
Well, I mean, the last thing too, you mentioned the failing aspect. I mean, the reality, right, is most, these pass rates are, 45, 50%. So that means a majority of people aren't passing. So, I wouldn't necessarily feel like, this is something you'll just have to realize. And not that we, don't hope for everybody to pass their first time around, but it's not the end of the world. And that's ultimately, as long as you come back and bounce back, then, you will get there. I think the last thing to do is, as you lead up to these last few days, kind of simulate what your day is going to be like.
Okay.
Like, even driving, what is the route? Like what time's your exam, right? And think about, what am I going to do in the morning? What am I going to eat for breakfast? Because whatever your routine is, even drive to the Prometric Center. So you're not, and walk up to the door, and maybe you can even go inside, just because those are the last, you don't want to have something pop up, or like you don't know where to go the day of. That will really get you flustered, right? And then your mind's just going to be scattered. So you need to have at least everything leading up to like the actual sitting down and taking it, like have that thought out, because in the weirdest way, that will make a big difference too, as to how you're mentally approaching, like, I'm ready to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alan. What's going on, Alan?
Yeah, I it's kind of funny that
What's going
on?
Yeah, it's funny that the FAR exam does seem to, everybody has this reaction of it's a lot of non-for-profit and government, which in reality is, it's probably a smaller percentage of the overall sort of finance accounting realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess any feedback that you want to give on that? I mean, I think you sound like you're confident, and that's step one. I think, the feedback right now to you would be, go back and maybe spend some more time on not-for-profit and government, if that's where you felt like, I was a bit weak in, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I think that every section has sort of its, kryptonite, if you will. Reg is business law, tends to be, audit tends to be the transaction cycles, and FAR is always government and non-for-profit accounting. And I can't tell you how many times I hear that it feels like government and nonprofit was just infested throughout the exam. And that's because it's probably the one that you feel less confident in, and maybe you don't understand it as much. And I think that is probably telling, because I mean, when you see something on an exam and it freaks you out, you notice it and you remember it. Whereas it's going to start to feel like you're seeing that over and over. But the reality is, between nonprofit and government accounting, it makes up, 25, 30%, which is a significant portion. Nobody passes this exam without thoroughly understanding government and nonprofit to an extent. So, if that is an area that is weaker for you and you feel like you're sort of in the 40 to 50% understanding level, and, you want to try to get that up to 70 to 80%. And, you got to find a way to, you got to build your mental map for that one specific section. You got to build a systematic approach for attacking it. Yeah. And you got to get that confidence level up for those sections. That's just the reality of it,
Yeah. I know I spent a lot of time on I spent less time on it because it was, I didn't think, because, you look at the AICPA blueprints and you look at it, it's like, okay, it's only 15% here for state, then 10% for profit. And then you got all these other sections that's like 30%, so I spent a lot of times on those, like, the net income and other comprehensive income, all that stuff I'm trying to master. And I actually mastered. I felt confident. I wrote good notes on it, reviewed the notes. But, I really, I did enough. Actually, I spent more time on state government and understanding that, but it wasn't even a lot of questions on that. There was some, but it was more for-profit. For-profit was kind of tricky for me, honestly. And then I, just how happened, I had more questions on those, and that was pretty my downfall from there. And then, once I got into, the task-based simulations, I didn't think it was horrible. It's just I had to rush it a bit because I actually spent too much time on the MCQs. Okay. And I had to kind of rush task-based. I think if I, get through those MCQs quicker, I'd say about a good hour and a half. I had 2.5 hours to really work on the task-based. I think I'd be fine. And then another thing is I thought, I was looking at, I did the bank reconciliation. I had one. I was like excited that I had it, but it was so different. It was like, oh my goodness, so it kind of threw me off. But I think I know where my weaknesses are and what I need to target, and I just need to come with a better strategy for the next exam.
That's the adaptation that you need. Yeah, at first I read that and I thought it said non-for-profit, which is like it's funny, but people think about non-for-profit as being like a totally separate realm of accounting. It's really actually similar to for-profit accounting.
Right.
There's just some different terminology, which you kind of have to understand. But the broad concept is relatively the same, right? It follows most of U.S. GAAP as well, in a sense, and it's still prescribed by the FASB. So it's there's a lot. I mean, I can honestly say my 10 years. You're either in not-for-profit or you're not, or you're either in government or you're not. You never see any overlap. So it's funny how those are two isolated topics or sections that a lot of people are just like why are they there? There was actually it was brought up this past year as to removing some of those topics on government from the CPA exam altogether, but obviously the government didn't like that. We got rid of IFRS, so
that was good. That's a start. Yeah, that was good. I was kind of happy about that.
Joey, Sanjeev had a question on the taxability provision of foreign.
Yeah, Matt just dishes this off to me. This is maybe the toughest topic, and it's so funny. I literally I did an entire thing on this, but I just what we're talking. All right, so we're talking about foreign income from CFC and SFC. This is like, I know what you're talking about, and it's extremely frustrating for me right now because I'm blanking on those little details. I'll tell you what, Sanjeev, I'm gonna spend a little time looking into this, and I'm gonna reach out to you. I know we're connected on Facebook, and I have your email, and we have some dialogue. So I'm gonna spend a little extra time and just make sure that I give you something, so I don't give you a BS answer right now.
We got this question from Sam. You guys are killing us with these technical ones. As much as you think we know this at the top of our head.
SSARS.
We kind of all work on. I mean, you can imagine all 4 of these exams at once. Everybody knows how much content there is. Let me take a second to read this.
Yeah, I think I might know this actually. In the scenarios, you can disclaim the review report under SSARS engagement.
I mean, one of the main reasons in general that an auditor or accountant would disclaim is basically they're not given necessary information, right? They're not independent. The management team isn't actually doing what they're supposed to in accordance with whatever the engagement letter set out. So that's the big thing about when you see like disclaimer of opinion, right? Or they just can't wrap their arms around. I forget exactly what all the rules are, but it's different than an adverse opinion, right? It's more, it's not necessarily that the financial statements aren't, in accordance with the standards. It's more of these sort of subjective type of reasons.
Yeah, are you talking about when you say disclaim the review report? Are you talking about issuing a disclaimer of opinion, or are you talking about? I guess I'm trying to better understand so I can give you an answer that. If you want to vocalize that, or if it's easier to type it, is there an image? Yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, the accountant does need to be independent when issuing the review conclusion. And what you need to remember when it comes to reviews is that you're issuing limited procedures here when disclaim the report, not opinion. Oh, I see. Okay, I think I see what you're saying. Yeah. So we're coming to a conclusion here, and it's not an opinion when it comes to reviews. I think I follow what you're asking, but at the end of the day, the things you need to remember is the accountant does need to be independent. They're issuing the review report because they're doing less work, right? An audit is a robust, detailed report, and you're ultimately opining on the financial statements. Some companies just need a review. They don't need a detailed audit opinion, an audit report. So they're going to be issuing this because it's less in scope. And what you need to remember primarily is the limited procedures, inquiries, and analytical procedures. If that sort of clears up what you're asking a little bit. Okay, great. Boom. All right, let me read this for a second.
It depends. So this is basically every state. What state are you in? Every state has a little different rules, but basically there's two rules. You can either sit for the exam versus be able to get the license, right? So some states say you have to have 150 to sit and get the license. Some states will say you only have to have your bachelor's degree to sit for the exam. So then basically you could pass all 4 exams before you go back and get those additional credits, right? Just, that makes most sense. And I think that's why a lot of states went that route, because, some people don't even know if it's for them. So if they have to go get the extra, 22 hours and then take the exams and then find out, then, that's why they got rid of that. So what state would you be sitting in? I can look it up real quick and send you the link.
Hi, this is Dea. I was asking about the process of getting to the exam. So I haven't really started anything yet. I'm just a junior in college, undergraduate, but I just wanted to get more information on when's the best time to register. Like currently, because I transferred from a college from overseas, and I'm doing a lot of subjects again, a lot of classes because of the IFRS system. They didn't accept a lot of my credits. Now I will graduate with over 50 credits, but that will be in December next year.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just asking for more information on when.
Sure. So I mean, I sat for the exam without the 150 credits, and I know that in most states you don't need 150 credits to sit for the exam. You need 150 credits to obtain the license. So 120 credits more or less is generally what you need to actually sit for the exams in most states. But I can't stress enough. I know a lot of people really try to emphasize getting the 150 before they sit for the exam. I can assure you the hurdle here is not going to be getting the credits. The hurdle here is going to be passing all 4 sections of the CPA exam. If I were you, if you, assuming you already have the 150 credits, not a problem. But for anyone else who's, in the same issue or in the same situation, I wouldn't pass go, collect $200, do anything until you pass the CPA exams, assuming you could take it. Because again, getting the extra credits to get the license is the easy part, in my opinion.
Yeah, what state would you try to be licensed in, or where would you take your exam?
Oh, yeah, New York.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
That's where I'm from.
is that less than 150, Joey?
I mean, I got it under 150. Yeah, I definitely
So
didn't
then,
have
yeah,
150 when I passed when I took the exams.
Let me. I'm looking it up right now.
I highly doubt they made an exception for me.
Yeah, here it is. So you only have to have 120. So I'll just post it in
That's
here.
sort of what I thought.
But yeah, and then as far as the four exams from each other, I mean, as far as scheduling out your exams, it really depends on how much time you can devote. I mean, in general, there are 100 to 150 hours. So it just depends like how much time you can spend each week, because like the longer you spread them out, the more time you're going to need for review. Like I know I'm in the minority, but I did most of them in about 2 weeks, back to back to back. So when it's that condensed, my review period didn't need to be as long. But if you're studying over 4 months for FAR because you work full time, well, imagine, you're in month 4, you probably don't even remember what you did in month 1, right? So you're going to need more time to review. So I wouldn't worry too much about planning out, and this goes for everybody. Don't plan all 4 exams out at once. Just take one at a time. And I guarantee you're going to learn a lot about the process after you go through one time. So just keep that in mind. I mean, having a general plan in play, that's a good idea, but definitely don't go schedule them all at once.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recently started to learn the CPA. I started with FAR. Would like to know how many hours quality time. Yeah. So when it comes to studying for FAR, we get this a lot. How much time goes into it. The only thing I would suggest you consider in terms of just the time element of studying for FAR is the time you've spent between topics. Right. At the end of the day, there's no black and white solution to being ready for FAR, right? You can't just put in 150 hours and just say, okay, I'm done, I'm ready for FAR. If you have a schedule that enables you to study every single day, call it 2 to 3 hours a day, as far as the time element goes, you need to be considering how much time has gone before you've refreshed that previous topic. Okay, so if we're talking about cash flows, right, the statement of cash flows, and you've gone through it and you feel good about it, you went through the homework and you're scoring 75, 80%, you're moving on, right? What you need to consider is how long has it been since I've refreshed that topic? Because if 7 weeks go by, which is what it's going to take to get ready for this exam, and you haven't looked at that, it's going to be harder for you to go back and see that information again and refresh your memory and get the same 75 to 80% that you were previously getting when you were going through the material. So can't stress it enough. There isn't a black and white X amount of hours that is going to get you ready for the exam. It's about consistent study time and consistent time between each respective section that you're looking at. What do you think?
One strategy that I think is helpful too. I shared this with you, Alan. It's to view each week like you basically the 4 or 5 days up until the weekend, right? You go through and learn the individual topics. But then on the weekend, do like a cumulative review of all the topics that you would have learned in prior weeks and that week itself. Because if you do these cumulative tests, which means like if you're in chapter 5, do a practice test on chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 together, right? Just random, 10 or 15 sets of MCQs. And even just seeing that topic, whether, hopefully you get it right, but even just seeing the topic, then you'll remember a lot of the things that you had learned, right? And that's kind of what it is when it comes to retention, is sometimes all you need, especially if you truly understand it, is just one little quick, visual or something to remind you of what you learned, right? And you replay that scenario in your head and you understand it, right? And that keeps it fresh. And so when, like Joey was saying, with how much information's in FAR, if you try to wait to the end to do this kind of cumulative review, you're going to become very overwhelmed because you're going to be like, I studied chapters 1, 2, and 3, and I knew it at the time, but now I don't, right? So if you do these cumulative practice tests, you always have a kind of a running list in your mind of all the topics you need to know, and that's how you keep it as fresh as possible. And honestly, that's why we use the visual learning, because it's easier to remember a visual instead of a piece of text, but that's just us.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to snowball off of that, or I mean, the
Yeah.
only thing I would add again is just kind of going back to what I said earlier about sort of attacking each topic within FAR as its own separate mini exam and asking yourself at a high level, okay, what are the 2 to 3 questions they typically like to ask? What are the 5, 6 different methods of inventory that, you know, I need to know for these types of calculations? And once you're able to sort of identify that for each topic, it becomes a lot easier to sort of drill down the nitty gritty details and kind of put together a systematic approach for each topic.
Yeah, I second
Yeah,
that.
Amber.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Alan.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I did when I was studying fire, I used Universal as well. I look at all the, I try to do all the MCQs, and there's the mental map approach to every topic to kind of retain. And then there's times where you will forget, but if you go back and, if I did 3 chapters and then I'm on my way to do chapter 4 each weekend, I would, I do 10 questions, to start off. And then once I gotten, to the later chapters, I try to, do 25 of them, just each topic to kind of keep it fresh. And then, sometimes you'll forget, and then you will go back and, go over, if you have to go over the visuals, even the MCQs, you wouldn't have to go to the lectures per se, but each question that you get wrong, you would look at the questions videos that's attached to that, and then also the mental map, because it keeps reminding you of the mental maps of each question. So that's what helped me to retain. That's why I was confident in the exam going forward. So I think it'll help everybody, using the program.
Good. Yeah, appreciate that. And that's kind of the idea behind the mental map, and being able to sort of attack it at a high level and drill into the details thereafter. But that's great stuff. Yeah. So any tips?
Yeah, Amber, I mean, that was probably similar to what your question, right? And I think when you're 8 days out, it's really just going back and sort of checking off all these boxes, right? Like, I don't know, there's probably 150 blueprint topics for FAR, right? And so the idea is to go back through and maybe just do a practice test on each chapter to start. And then kind of what that does is, because part of the challenge with the exam too, right, is you're so used to going through like a chapter, right? So you're in inventory and you're like, everything's going to be inventory related. But on the exam, it's like all over the place, right? So you need to be able to quickly like pick out the call, the question, think about like that learning point, that mental map or whatever, right? And then go from there, right? So sometimes, like, 8 days out, this is probably a good time to start to just do random practice tests that cover, whether it's the whole chapter or all the chapters. And that way you get used to seeing all of these random topics just kind of jumbled up. And that will also help you remember, what you know well, what you don't know well. If you don't know it well, take notes. And by this point, everybody has different perspectives on notes. My perspective was like, I tried to put everything into one page, just one side of a whole exam, right? And so that basically captured everything that I knew I absolutely needed to know, everything I didn't know well. And then if you just kind of keep refreshing yourself on your notes, because you hand wrote them, even rewriting them, it can be helpful. That will help you kind of feel confident in your weaknesses. But yeah, and anything else, Joey? I think it's difficult.
I would say, yeah, like I said earlier, again, at the end of the day, ideally you're sitting somewhere between a 75, 85% for each topic. And you want to have that level of confidence for each topic going into it. Just because FAR is so voluminous and you have so much to remember, you want to attack it one by one, each topic one at a time. And if you're able to identify, the reality is you're not going to be walking into that 75 to 85% confident on every single topic. There's going to be some that are lower, and you need to be able to identify what those topics are. And you could spend a little bit more time emphasizing the topics that you're struggling with. Maybe the ones you're scoring somewhere between a 60 and 70%. And you want to go back and you want to sort of see if you could pick up some of those extra points and refine some of your understanding to all that. At the end of the day, you gotta find ways to scrape across 75 points on this exam, and you gotta find areas that you can go ahead and spend extra time in and add some additional points to your score if it means spending an extra hour or two clearing some issues up, especially if it's emphasized from the blueprint. But as far as, one thing I'll add real quick is, as far as MCQs and sims go, the only thing I would say related to sims is practicing sims really just assesses your ability to think critically about a topic. When you're going through a sim, if you can identify what specific topic this is talking about, and you can identify, again, the 3 to 4 types of questions or calculations that they like to emphasize, now all of a sudden you can start navigating your way through the exhibits and start looking through those and for relevant information and sort of attack it backwards. Because at the end of the day, there's really no specific way to study for sims. You never know what they're going to give you, and it's about thinking critically through them.
Yep. Yeah, I would say just the one last thing is just a very general point, but now's the time too to kind of be honest with yourself as to what you don't know well, right? Everybody wants to avoid, they always have a few things they want to avoid, right? We do this in life in general where we just ignore it. I think this is the time where you just have to be honest with yourself as to what topics you definitely don't know and spend some extra time there and just do whatever. I mean, if it gets to the point too, ask us. I mean, we're sometimes, I know the material's in there one way, but at the same time, there's other ways to learn it, right? And so now's the time to just be honest with yourself as to where your weaknesses are, because unfortunately, the exam will find a way to exploit them. It's just, it seems like, that's just what happens. Everybody's weaknesses is like, that's exactly what you get tested on versus like, why didn't they test me on the stuff I knew? So.
Yeah, 100%. Does Universal CPA Review provide visual solutions for answers on all subjects? Yes. So that is, one area we definitely pride our product on is the fact that every single solution not only comes with that video explanation, but it also comes with that unique visual. And if for whatever reason you see a question that doesn't have a visual, definitely flag it, and we'll definitely move that to the top of our priority list. Because that is something that we find to be very important, is making sure that every solution comes with a unique visual to help sort of paint that picture and give you everything you need to thoroughly understand it.
Yeah, and the visuals are based off of a culmination of a lot of insight we've gathered from ourselves, from other students to find ways to make them, they're not just visual, because visual learning can be very overwhelming if the visual doesn't have an importance. And so a lot of these visuals have been tweaked to only include the relevant and most necessary information. So yeah, it's a constant refining process, right? It takes what everybody else already has to another level of effort. But that's in our minds how we also simplify it. So yeah, I mean, check it out. We have a free trial if you haven't used it yet.
Do we have any research questions coming soon, Matt? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so the research topic is interesting because, to be honest, the reason we don't is it's very expensive to license some of the codification, especially for FAR. They charge like $50 per page, and and just loading that in is a challenge. I mean, you can actually get, I think it's through your NASBA license or subscription, you can get access to the full codification, which is what you'll have on the exam. Because I think the issue is a lot of the review courses, even Becker, they only have the pages in there that are necessary to answer those research sims. And so even then, yes, you get familiar with kind of what you need to do, but it's a different challenge on the exam because the full codification's there. We are in process of adding those. We have the technology, we just have not acquired the license yet for some of the, especially for the codification.
Yeah, the FASB, that's sort of our biggest hurdle. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that is in the pipeline. But what I want to stress is, as far as preparing for sims go, I mean, there's only so much you could do in terms of practicing the research sims. The research sims, it's testing your ability to sort of navigate through the FASB codification. Can you use an advanced search tool? And there's only so much we can do to guide you in that. And, the whole point of our video explanations and our robust, visuals that allow you to see it, is to help you understand the topics and the concepts. As far as guiding you through how to use the research tool, We could definitely do that, and we're going to do that. And like I said, it's a priority for us. But we're trying to emphasize first and foremost content and making sure you understand the concepts. Do we have progress tests with mock exams in the future? Yes, we will, and they are coming very soon.
Well, progress tests, right now you can go off to the right. So like you have your main menu up for the specific exam that has all the chapters modules. Off to the right, there's like an area you can select progress tests. It'll bring up a window that lists out all the chapters and modules, and you can go through and select or select all. And that's kind of, okay, great. The mock exam, the biggest thing I'd say with the mock exam is really just to help you learn time limits, right? Like for FAR, yes, you have 4 hours. We recommend, 2 hours or so for multiple choice, 2 hours for SIM. That's probably the biggest benefit of a mock exam. You can go to the AICPA website to do a sample test to sort of see what the actual exam is going to look like. It's very similar to ours, not one for one, just because we didn't want to make it one for one for a number of reasons. But yes, we're going to be adding a mock exam, in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, it's definitely in the pipeline, and we're gonna do what we can to make sure you guys have everything you need. Who's next? Who's the next one? We have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any last minute questions they want to squeeze in, now's the time. Otherwise, we can.
Yeah, I guess certainly always email us as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan.
I can go ahead and share something. What I do is, with each topics you got, for example, FAR, I had 9 chapters, and then you had the different modules. What I did was, it's tedious, but I think it helps me out to focus on my my areas I need to prove on and areas I need to, okay, I got it, So I just marked, I got an Excel spreadsheet that I have, and just listed all the chapters, all the modules, and I highlight the green ones that, I don't need to spend too much time on it. I can still always go and refresh it, but not spend too much time on it. Yellow is, I mark them yellow if it's, I kind of got it, but I can use a little research on it. And I mark red for any of the topics that I really need to spend a lot of time on. So that's my method. At least I know visually what I need to focus on going forward. So I just want to throw that out there for the class.
Yeah, I think that's a great move. I mean, honestly, we know that like from a tracking analytics perspective in our platform, we've already started to wireframe out a lot of the next version of the platform. As I hope you can understand, like it's very expensive to do some of this stuff. And so we've tried to focus a lot more on the content first, because tech won't, make content better. But we do understand that like there is so much information, and it's hard to sometimes assess your weaknesses. So we're going to be adding in technology that helps you do that, helps you, stay more on a study plan. The mock exam, all that stuff, that's all in the pipeline. But as it is today, I think at the end of the day, if you do something like this in Excel, like you're going to have, because you are owning that responsibility of where your weaknesses are. I mean, that's step number one to, being confident, right? Your weaknesses, your strengths, and sometimes, good old Excel, gets the job done. So I think that's a great move. And I recommend that, to anybody.
Yep. So, I mean, I would just echo that. So, I mean, I think at this point, that's kind of the time that we set. I do want to extend a 30% discount to all of you who joined. We opened that up. The discount code would be AskJoey30 for 30% off. I'll go ahead and write this in the chat just so that anybody who's interested in upgrading can utilize that and save a little bit of money.
Yeah, and like I said, our emails are in there, so always reach out. If you're in the platform, there's the Ask Joey a Question underneath all the lectures, MCQ simulations. We're on top of that as well. Hopefully we're being as responsive as possible. Yeah, Lead, we're working on an ebook. That's actually a little bit more difficult than you would think, because part of the benefit of our platform right now is we can, because these topics, we're taking feedback from everybody every day and improving our materials. And if we put it out in an ebook or a published book, it becomes static. And we don't want people to necessarily, like, we're trying to figure out a way to have an ebook that could automatically update, because we want to be able to push these updates out. And we do that daily, weekly right now, rather than having a static book out there for 6 months when we know that it could be better. So that's something we're working on. But like if we went the Amazon route, like Amazon makes it very, very difficult to publish changes to a book. There's like a whole process. And so that's something we're looking into as well, because we know like our PDF book in the platform is nice, but it's not as, as good as it could be. So anything tech related, we've been taking feedback for, quite a while, and definitely keep giving it to us, because that's going to help frame sort of the next, all the technology that's coming. So appreciate it though. And yeah, we're always here. So reach out whenever.
Yep, and we're going to continue to do this more often. So if you guys find this helpful, obviously continue to join us. And we love to hear your questions. We love to keep the engagement alive. And at the end of the day, your success is our success. So we're going to do everything we can to go above and beyond to get you all through these exams.